Welcome back, everyone. For this deep dive, we're taking a look at The Reign of Greed. It's a 1912 English translation of José Rizal's El Filibusterismo. And,
And a sequel, no less.
right, which automatically makes things more interesting, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. El Filibusterismo comes after Noli Me Tangere, or The Social Cancer. Diving into a sequel, well, it's like we're stepping into a story already in motion. There's this whole world already there, characters we may or may not know, and always that lingering question. What happened after?
Exactly. We're not starting from scratch. Even the translator's introduction mentions that El Filibusterismo shows a more, mature side of Rizal, maybe even a little less hopeful compared to his first book. And it was written years after his attempts to kind of push for reforms in the Philippines hit some roadblocks.
It really adds another dimension, doesn't it? Knowing about Rizal's own experiences is like El Filibusterismo becomes more than just a story. It's a reflection of what was happening in the Philippines under Spanish rule, seen through the lens of Rizal's, well, his own disillusionment.
So it's not just about the plot of El Filibusterismo, then, is it? It's also about what it tells us about Rizal and about the Philippines during this really intense period.
Precisely. And to really grasp what El Filibusterismo is trying to say, we need to rewind a bit. Thankfully, the translator's introduction gives us a good summary of Noli Me Tangere, which sort of sets the stage for our deep dive.
Okay, hit me with it. Backstory time.
All right, so the story starts with Juan Crisostomo Ibarra coming home to the Philippines. He's been away studying in Europe for 7 years. Young guy inheriting his family's wealth, engaged to this beautiful woman named Maria Clara. But of course, things get complicated. Ibarra finds out that his father died under, shall we say, mysterious circumstances, and a Franciscan friar, Padre Damaso, is involved.
Ooh, mysterious death of friar. Sounds like things are about to get interesting.
Oh, it gets better. Ibarra, he's full of these idealistic dreams, throws himself into improving his community, even starts building a new schoolhouse. But he keeps clashing with this Padre Damaso, who seems to have a personal grudge against Ibarra's entire family.
Ah, the classic clash of ideals. And I'm guessing the church, they have a lot of power here.
Oh, absolutely. During the schoolhouse construction, there's this accident, almost kills Ibarra. And, well, it's pretty clear that Padre Damaso is behind it all. Really shows you the power the church had.
Okay, so we've got personal grudges, religious power plays, attempted murder. Where does Maria Clara fit into all of this?
Well, her story takes a turn for the worse, let me tell you. Letters from her dead mother pop up, and guess what? They reveal that Padre Damaso is actually her father.
Talk about a scandal.
Oh, right. This revelation throws everyone into chaos. But amidst all of this, Ibarra gets falsely accused of starting a rebellion. He's arrested. Things look bleak. But there's this mysterious guy, Elias, connected to Ibarra's past, and he helps him escape. But, and this is the truly tragic part, Elias sacrifices himself to save Ibarra. Disappears into the water, just like that.
Yeah, talk about a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
So what happens to Maria Clara?
She's devastated, obviously. Ibarra is presumed dead, and she's pressured by another shady friar, Padre Salvi, into thinking she has to protect her family name from scandal. She's basically forced into a marriage she doesn't want, so she chooses to enter a convent instead.
So Noli Me Tangere leaves us with Ibarra presumed dead, Maria Clara seeking refuge, Elias gone. Talk about unfinished business. Sounds like El Filibusterismo has a lot to unpack.
Oh, it does. 13 years pass, and we're introduced to a new character. Simon, a wealthy jeweler with an air of mystery about him.
Simon. That name seems familiar. Any chance he might be connected to those loose ends from Noli Me Tangere?
And here's where the sequel really kicks in. Simon is Ibarra, back after years of exile, and let me tell you, he's out for revenge. His experiences have hardened him, and he's returned to the Philippines with a plan. He's going to dismantle the system that wronged him.
Okay, now that changes things. We're not just dealing with fallout from Noli Me Tangere anymore. We're dealing with a man driven by, well, revenge. Makes that shift in Rizal's perspective even more fascinating, don't you think?
Absolutely. And this is where the, let's say, the darker side of Rizal's message about colonial society really starts to come through. In El Filibusterismo, he doesn't shy away from showing us the ugly truth about corruption and just what happens when power goes unchecked.
So how's he going to get his revenge? What's his game plan?
Oh, it's cunning and dangerous. Simon uses his wealth and influence to subtly manipulate the system, which, let's be honest, is already corrupt. He's stoking the flames, trying to expose the hypocrisy of it all and bring about its downfall.
Cow. He's like pulling the strings from the inside.
Exactly. And it's a risky move that makes us ask ourselves some hard questions. Is violence ever justified, even when you're fighting oppression? What are the consequences, intended or not, of actions like this?
Those are some serious questions, and it sounds like we're just scratching the surface here.
We are. Remember, we're looking at all of this from multiple angles. The characters, their journeys, Rizal's message, and of course the historical context of the Philippines under Spanish rule.
Speaking of which, this translation of El Filibusterismo we're working with, it's from 1912, right? Published in Manila just a few years after the Philippine Revolution. That adds a whole other layer to everything.
It does. I mean, who was this translation intended for? What was it like for Filipinos to be reading this story during that time?
Those are all great questions, and I think they speak to how powerful Rizal's writing really is. El Filibusterismo, it's not just a story, it's a cultural touchstone,
Yeah.
reflecting a very specific time and place, but it also sparks conversations that are still so relevant today.
Exactly. It's a story that still resonates with readers over a century later, and that's what makes this deep dive so exciting.
Okay, so we've laid the groundwork, got some historical context, and set the stage for Simon's grand entrance. Now let's dive into the thick of it. Let's see how Rizal brings all these characters and themes to life in El Filibusterismo.
As we get into El Filibusterismo, it becomes clear that Simon's not just after personal revenge, He's back in a society that's still dealing with the same injustices that transformed him into who he is now.
It's like that feeling of stepping back into a pressure cooker. You can really feel the tension Rizal creates, mirroring what it was like in the Philippines then.
Absolutely. And one of the most powerful examples of that tension is the story of Cabisang Tales, this farmer who loses his land to, you guessed it, the friars.
Oh man, his story really got to me. This is a guy just trying to make a living, and the very people who are supposed to be, moral and upstanding, they're the ones driving him to do desperate things.
Right. It's a prime example of how Filipinos were being exploited. Cabisang Tales, he becomes a bandit, which just shows you the impossible situations people were forced into if they dared to question the system.
Makes you wonder who the real bad guys are, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
And in the middle of all this, you've got the younger generation, guys like Basilio and Isagani, trying to find their place.
Especially Basilio, still dealing with the trauma of his past. He's really vulnerable to Simon's influence, I think. Almost like he's drawn to the idea of revenge, like it's a way to finally deal with all that pain.
Yeah, he's caught between wanting justice, but also seeing what getting it through violence might cost, a dilemma a lot of Filipinos probably faced back then.
And then there's Isagani, who's got this youthful idealism that, honestly, Basilio seems to have lost. He still believes in the power of words, in love.
He does. And his love for Paulita Gomez, even though it seems like a separate storyline at first, it really highlights how complex Filipino society was. You have this smart, beautiful young woman, but even she's pressured to marry according to these social rules, rules that value status over actual love.
It's like these power dynamics, they affect everything, even matters of the heart. But going back to Simon's revolution, he's not just whispering in people's ears, right? This guy is actually arming a rebellion.
Oh, he is. And this is where El Filibusterismo really forces us to confront some tough questions about violence, Even if it's in the face of oppression, is it ever justified? What could happen? What are the consequences?
Those are big questions. Questions about human nature, really.
They are. And Rizal doesn't sugarcoat the brutality of it all. Remember, he's writing from a place of really understanding why people might resort to violence, but also the damage it can cause.
It's a huge gamble, with the fate of the Philippines hanging in the balance. In the event, Simoun chooses to set his plan in motion. The wedding of Paulita Gomez and Juanito Pelaez, talk about symbolic, right?
Right. The wedding becomes this kind of microcosm of the society Rizal is criticizing. It's all about wealth and power and where your loyalties lie. It's hard to tell who's really on what side.
And in the middle of it all, there's Simon, ready to blow everything up. So suspenseful.
Yeah.
Like something big is about to happen, but you have no idea how it's all going to go down.
But we have to remember, this is a tragedy, not an action story. And tragedies, well, they often depend on those unexpected twists of fate.
And Rizal delivers. Let me tell you, just when it seems like everything's about to explode, Isagani, he finds Simon's bomb disguised as a lamp and throws it into the river.
Can you imagine? An act of love trying to save Paulita ends up completely ruining Simon's carefully crafted plan.
Oh, the irony. This revolution that Simon has sacrificed everything for, thwarted by a heartbroken young man who has no idea what's really at stake.
Really goes to show you what a skilled writer Rizal was. He takes these separate threads, love, revenge, revolution, and weaves them together seamlessly.
So what happens to Simon after that? after his plan falls apart.
Well, he goes to Padre Florentino, the voice of reason and compassion, remember him. And it's in those final moments that Simon really starts to show his true self.
It's like the weight of all his choices finally hits him.
Yes. As he's dying, he tells Padre Florentino who he really is, Ibarra, the hopeful young man who just wanted to make things better. And he talks about the journey that led him down this dark path.
It's sad when you think about everything he lost, the choices he made, and how that desire for revenge, it didn't give him the peace he was looking for.
It makes you think, even when our intentions are good, the road to justice is rarely easy. And as Simon takes his last breath, he has this deep philosophical conversation with Padre Florentino about violence, forgiveness, and that dream of a free Philippines.
It's amazing how even with everything going on, the revolution, Simon's despair, resolve still makes us care about the people caught in the middle. Julie's story, for example, that one really stayed with me.
Absolutely. Julie, she represents the people who are the most vulnerable in these systems, the ones with no power. Her story is tragic, but reminds us that oppression has very real consequences for real people.
It's easy to focus on the big picture, right? Revolution, reforms, independence, but then Julie's story brings it back down to earth. It's personal. And then there's Basilio. He represents a different kind of loss, I think.
Yeah, his journey is really something. Here's a guy, he's worked so hard to overcome his past, and yet he still can't seem to escape it, It's like colonialism has this hold on him that he can't shake no matter what he does.
It's like he's carrying the weight of the Philippine struggles on his shoulders, even if he doesn't realize it. Makes you wonder, what happens to someone like him? Or even a country like the Philippines, after going through something like that? How do you even begin to heal?
And that is the question, isn't it? That's what El Filibusterismo leaves us with. Simon is gone, the revolution failed, and we've got this image of Basilio swimming away from it all.
Powerful imagery, right? But
Yeah.
so uncertain. Is he going to continue what Simon started? Or will he find a different path? Or will he just get swept away? Another victim of circumstance.
That's the beauty of Rizal's writing, though, don't you think? He doesn't give us easy answers, does he? He leaves things open, makes us sit with these uncomfortable questions. Because the reality is, even after tragedy, life goes on. History goes on.
It's like Rizal wants us, the readers, to figure it out. What do W.E. think will happen to Basilio? What about the Philippines? He's challenging us to keep thinking even after the book is over.
Exactly. El Filibusterismo, it makes us think critically about colonialism, the fight for freedom, the sacrifices people make. It's not a passive story.
Definitely not. So this deep dive, it wasn't just about one novel, was it? It was about how stories can stay with us. Rizal gave us characters and situations that we're still thinking about over 100 years later.
It's because these themes, oppression, resistance, searching for who you are, those are timeless. They speak to us no matter where or when we are. And by engaging with these themes through Rizal's work, we learn more about our world, too. The world we live in now.
It's a good reminder that even though El Filibusterismo deals with some tough stuff, there's still hope. Simon might not have succeeded, but the fight for a better future, that never really ends.
And that fight, it's not just happening in a book, is it? It's a reminder that we all have a part to play in making the world a better place.
Well said. This deep dive has been a journey, that's for sure. We've explored the history, the characters, the big questions about justice, freedom, what it means to fight for what you believe in.
We hope you've learned more about El Filibusterismo, but also that we've maybe sparked your curiosity, We encourage you to read more of Rizal's work and learn more about the Philippines. It's a fascinating history.
And maybe, just maybe, it'll get you thinking about the world around you in new ways. So until next time, thanks for joining us. Keep asking those questions and keep exploring.